All in favor of removing Celeste as trustee and placing Richard's company under his only son, raise your hand.
Julian raised his beside hers. At the far end of the dining table, 24-year-old Talia looked at her mother, then at the brother sitting in their father's chair. Her fingers curled against her palm. Valora gave her one small nod. Talia raised her hand too. Julian leaned back with a smile.
3-1. The family has spoken.
Celeste remained still. The cream-colored agreement they wanted her to sign lay beneath her hand, along with the silver pen Valora had placed there for her.
Before you celebrate, you should find out whether any of you owns enough voting shares for that decision to matter.
Valora turned toward Richard's younger brother. Leonard had said almost nothing since the meeting began. Now he reached into his briefcase and placed a sealed Navy file on the table. Richard gave me this 6 weeks ago, he said. He told me to open it if anyone tried to rush Julian into his chair. Valora stared at the file. He never told me about that. Leonard rested his hand on the seal. According to his letter, that was the point. 5 days earlier, the flowers from Richard Morgan's funeral were still fresh when Julian took over his office. Morgan Home and Building Supply had started as one narrow hardware store in Greensboro, North Carolina. Richard had opened it with borrowed shelves and a cash register that jammed whenever the weather turned cold. 32 years later, the company had 3 stores, 80 employees, and a name local contractors trusted. Julian saw something else when he looked at it. Money that could keep his dealership alive. Celeste arrived at the first store shortly after 8 on Monday morning. She expected Richard's office to be locked. Instead, his photographs had been pushed onto the windowsill. Julian's tablet sat in the center of his desk, and a green dealership jacket hung over the back of his chair. Dana Morris, the company's finance director, stood near the filing cabinet with a yellow notebook against her chest. "Send the bank access forms before lunch," Julian told her. "And copy the last 12 months of company records to my accountant." Dana did not write anything. "I need written authority before I can add you to the accounts." Julian looked up slowly. "I'm Richard Morgan's son. How much more authority do you need?" "The kind the bank accepts." Celeste stepped through the doorway. "Dana is right." Julian's face tightened. "Of course you're here. You asked for company records to be sent outside the company. To my accountant, your dealership accountant. He doesn't work here." Julian stood. At 30, he had mastered the appearance of success. His suits were fitted. His smile covered 2 billboards beside Interstate 40. He drove a different luxury SUV every few weeks and called it marketing. Richard used to say Julian spent $10 proving he had 5. "Dad always said I would take over one day," Julian said. "Then show Dana where he wrote it down. You think being a lawyer gives you the right to question me? Dana questioned you first." Dana lowered her eyes, but the corner of her mouth moved. Julian picked up Richard's worn brass store key. "Dad carried this for 30 years. It belongs to the head of the company." "It opens the front door," Celeste said. "It doesn't open the bank accounts." Valora appeared behind them in the dark gray dress she had worn to the funeral. A cream folder was pressed against her chest. "Why are we arguing?" she asked. "We buried your father yesterday." Celeste glanced at Julian's tablet, his jacket, and the photographs stacked beside the window. "Ask the person who moved into his office." Valora went to Julian and touched his shoulder. "He's trying to keep the company steady. The stores already have managers. They need a Morgan in charge." Dana cleared her throat. "Payroll is ready. Supplier drafts are scheduled. Nothing is being delayed." Julian looked at her. "You can go." Dana stayed where she was. Celeste took out her phone and called Maya Green, the probate attorney she had contacted while Richard was in the hospital. Celeste handled employment cases, not estates, which was exactly why Maya's number had been in her phone since the week Richard was admitted. "Maya, please send a record preservation notice to the company today. No accounts added, no files removed, and no records changed until authority is confirmed." Valora stared at her. "You are making this ugly." Celeste ended the call. "I'm asking everyone to leave Dad's records where he left them." Julian dropped the brass key onto the desk. It struck the wood with a hard click. "You always do this," he said. "You walk in, use 5 legal words, and make everyone act like you're the smartest person in the room." "I used one word you didn't like. Authority. Get out of my father's office." Celeste picked up one of Richard's photographs. It showed him standing outside the first store with Walter Bennett, the manager who had worked beside him for 21 years. She returned it to the middle of the desk. It is still his office until the documents say otherwise. That afternoon, Valora came to Celeste's townhouse carrying the cream folder. Celeste had changed out of her funeral dress, but Richard's reading glasses were still inside the hospital bag on her kitchen counter. She had brought them home by mistake after his last admission. Every time she reached for the bag, she stopped. Valora sat at the kitchen table without removing her coat. I don't want this family fighting over money. Celeste poured water into 2 glasses. Then why did Julian ask for bank access the morning after the funeral? The company needs a leader. It has store managers, a finance director, and an operating president. Employees look to family in times like this. Dana looked at Julian and asked for paperwork. Valora pushed the folder across the table. This is temporary. Sign it, and Julian can keep things moving until the estate is settled. Celeste opened it. The first page named Julian temporary president. The second allowed him to replace senior employees. The third gave his dealership accountant access to company records. Page 4 released Julian and Valora from responsibility for any family business decisions made during Richard's illness. The final page was worse. It claimed Richard had shown signs of confusion before his death and asked the family to recognize Julian as the person he had always intended to succeed him. Celeste read the agreement again more slowly. Valora tapped one polished nail against the table. It is a simple family arrangement. Why does a temporary arrangement release payments made before Dad died? Who wrote it? Julian's attorney reviewed it. The attorney for his dealership? Why does that matter? Because this gives his accountant access to Dad's records and protects transactions that have nothing to do with temporary leadership. Valora reached for the folder. Celeste held it in place. What payments are you trying to protect? There you go again. Accusing people before your father is cold in the ground. I asked a question. You know exactly what you're doing. Valora stood and walked to the window. Richard worried about you, she said. He worried that after your divorce, you would come back here looking for something to control. Celeste watched her stepmother's reflection in the glass. When did he say that? Many times. Name one. Valora turned. This is why your marriage failed. Every conversation becomes a courtroom. The words landed where Valora intended them to. For 18 months, she had used Celeste's divorce as proof that Celeste could not keep a promise, even though she had never asked why the marriage ended. Celeste closed the folder. Leave this with Maya. She can send it to me. You could save everyone the expense and sign it now. No. Your brother will remember that you stood in his way. He should remember to bring written authority next time. Valora snatched up the folder. You left this family once. Don't expect us to welcome you back while you tear it apart. At the door, Celeste finally answered. I didn't come back for a welcome. I came because Dad died. Valora left without touching the water. That evening, Julian returned to his dealership after closing. The showroom lights made the 6 remaining vehicles look more impressive than they were. For belonged to an inventory lender. One had already been promised to a customer. The black Range Rover near the front window was the only car Julian owned outright, and even that carried a second loan. His sales manager, Marcus Bell, waited beside the reception desk. Northridge called again, Marcus said. They want the overdue balance by Monday. Julian loosened his tie. I told you I'm handling it. They're sending someone to count the inventory tomorrow. Then make sure the numbers match. Marcus stared at him. They don't. Julian's phone rang. He answered before the second vibration. Mr. Pike, I said Monday. No, you won't need to collect anything. I have funds clearing from another company. Marcus looked toward the office. Julian turned away. 400,000. Yes. Monday morning. When the call ended, Marcus kept his voice low. What other company? Family business. Does your family know? Julian picked up his keys. My family knows who I am. The next morning, he called Dana before 7. I need a same-day transfer prepared for $400,000. Dana sat alone in the finance office, looking at the orange light on her desk phone. Prepared for whom? Morgan Premier Auto. Put it under temporary inventory acquisition. Morgan Supply doesn't buy cars. We use delivery vehicles. $400,000 worth? Don't make this difficult. Dad approved it. Dana opened Richard's payment log. There is no approved request. He told me before he went into the hospital. Then send me the agreement. Silence. Dana, you worked for my father. I would hate for new leadership to decide you are no longer a good fit. She looked at the red light indicating that the company line was being recorded. Richard had installed recording on all finance calls after a supplier dispute 2 years earlier. Are you instructing me to send $400,000 without written approval? Julian hung up. Dana saved the recording, printed the call log, and emailed both to Maya. Then she opened the prior year's transfers and searched for Morgan Premier Auto. 9 payments appeared. The first was for $42,000, approved by Richard and marked as a short-term advance for 2 delivery vans. The next 8 had been signed by Valora. Each one was below $50,000. Together, they totaled $386,000. Dana checked the vehicle list. The vans had never arrived. By noon, relatives were calling Celeste. Her cousin Marcia called first. Why did you freeze payroll? I didn't. Everyone was paid Friday. Valora said the employees are scared. Did Valora name one? Marcia paused. She said Julian can't even order inventory. The store managers placed their normal orders this morning. So what did you stop? Julian from adding himself to accounts he does not control. The next cousin asked why Celeste was selling the company. An older family friend said Valora had heard Celeste planned to close the first store. By the third call, the story had grown into something Celeste barely recognized. The divorced daughter who had ignored her father was now punishing the son who stayed. Celeste stopped correcting every rumor. She wrote down who had called, what they had been told, and when. Valora had always treated repetition as proof. If enough relatives heard the same story, she expected the family to accept it as fact. Talia heard that story every night at home. She was finishing the final year of a physical therapy program and still depended on the education fund Richard had created for her. She had moved home after her apartment lease ended, telling herself it was temporary. Valora paid the household bills and reminded Talia of it whenever they disagreed. At dinner on Wednesday, Julian arrived in a navy suit and placed his phone face down beside his plate. Celeste is trying to destroy the company, he said. Talia looked up. Why would she do that? Valora served Julian another piece of chicken. Because some people would rather control something than see someone else succeed. She says the accounts aren't frozen. Julian gave a short laugh. She called you. I asked her when she came for Dad's papers. And you believed her? Talia moved food around her plate. I don't know what I believe. Valora put down the serving spoon. Your father knew Julian should lead. He worried Celeste would use her law degree to take over after he was gone. Did he say that to you? More than once. Julian leaned toward his sister. Leonard's been sitting on some of Dad's paperwork. Fine. We vote Saturday, before the lawyers turn this into a 2-year fight. Whatever is in his folder walks into a room where the family has already decided. Can we vote on a trust? We can show what Dad's family wants. Valora reached across the table and covered Talia's wrist. Your brother is trying to protect the income that pays for all of us, including your school. Talia pulled her hand away slowly. My school comes from Dad's education fund, a fund still connected to this family. Nothing is guaranteed if Celeste takes control. Julian changed the subject before Talia could answer. The vote is at 2. We're something respectful. The following morning, Celeste met Maya and Leonard in a quiet conference room at Maya's office. Leonard brought the Navy file but kept it sealed. Richard was very clear about when this should be opened, he said. If the family follows the estate plan, it stays sealed until the accountant completes his review. If Julian tries to force control, we open it. Maya placed a trust summary in front of Celeste. You are named successor trustee. Leonard serves with you for the first 2 years. Celeste did not touch it. Why me? Leonard looked down at the file. Because Julian asked for money 3 times while Richard was in the hospital. Because Valora approved payments Richard could not explain. And because when your father asked Julian for records, Julian brought him promises. Did Dad know about all 9 transfers? He knew about the first one, Leonard said. He discovered the others later. Celeste removed Richard's reading glasses from her bag and set them on the table. He never said anything to me. He was ashamed, Leonard replied. Not of you. Of how long he let it continue. Celeste turned the glasses over in her hand. The left arm was still bent from where Richard used to hook them into his shirt pocket. 2 months before he died, on the last Saturday he drove himself to the store. He had called her into his office and closed the door. He was using the cane by then and pretending he wasn't, leaning it against the desk where visitors couldn't see it. A payment report lay open in front of him. If this were another company, he asked, what would you tell them to do? Celeste read the summary once. Stop the transfers. Keep every record. Bring in an independent accountant. Even if the person taking the money was family? Especially then. Family makes people skip the questions they would ask a stranger. Richard looked out at the sales floor, where Walter was helping a contractor load lumber onto a flatbed cart. Your brother thinks you've judged him since high school. I'm looking at math, Dad. Math doesn't have a personality. He almost smiled. Then he pulled the report closer and studied it the way he studied invoices, slowly, twice, with one finger moving down the column. Leave this with me, he said. She had left it with him. She had not known that within 2 weeks, his estate attorney, his accountant, his doctor, and his brother would sit in that same office with the door closed, and that a Navy file would leave the building in Leonard's briefcase. In Maya's conference room, Celeste set the glasses down. Maya turned the summary toward her. Richard had transferred 62% of the voting shares into a protected trust. Valora would keep the family home and receive monthly support. Talia's education fund was separate and protected. Julian and Talia remained beneficiaries, but neither received control of the company. Valora told Talia her tuition could disappear if I became trustee, Celeste said. Maya frowned. Valora received this same summary. She knows that isn't true. Leonard's expression hardened. Then Talia needs to hear it from someone else. Celeste put the glasses back in her bag. Not before Saturday. If I call her now, Valora will say I'm buying her vote. You don't need Talia's vote, Maya said. I know. She still needs to understand what she is voting for. Across town, Dana was tracing the transfers. The payments had been labeled consulting, fleet support, temporary stock, and vendor deposit. Different names, same destination. At 11:30, Julian walked into her office and closed the door. You sent my call to a lawyer. Dana kept both hands on her desk. I sent a company instruction to the estate attorney. It was a private conversation. You called the finance line and requested company money. He leaned over the desk. My father gave you this job. He gave me a job protecting his books. You think Celeste will save you when I take over? I think the bank will ask the same question I did. Where is your authority? Julian's phone rang. He turned toward the window to answer it. Mr. Pike, I said Monday. Then count the cars. Don't touch the Range Rover. Give me 4 days. Dana wrote 4 days in her yellow notebook. Julian saw her pen move. He ended the call and reached for the notebook. Dana pulled it against her chest. Don't. For 1 second, neither moved. Then the front office door opened. Walter Bennett stood in the hall with 2 invoices in his hand. Everything all right? Julian stepped back. Perfect. Dana and I were discussing her future. Walter looked from Julian to the notebook. Richard used to discuss that with the door open. Julian left without answering. That evening, Valora drove to the dealership. She had not visited in almost a year. The showroom smelled of leather cleaner and burned coffee, and Julian's face looked down from 3 of the 4 walls. Between the posters, the floor told a different story. 6 vehicles where 30 had once been parked in careful diagonal rows. A sales desk with no salesman behind it. Julian was in the back office with a red envelope torn open on the desk. Valora picked up the letter inside and read it twice. They can't demand this much in 4 days. They already did. Then call them. I've called 6 times. They froze my inventory line. If the money isn't there Monday, they start loading cars onto trucks in front of my customers. Once people see that, it's over. Valora set the letter down. You told me the last advance would cover this. It covered the older bills. $386,000 covered old bills? Julian came around the desk. The market turned. Rates went up. Buyers walked. I had inventory sitting for months. You told the family you were expanding. You showed everyone the second lot. I rented the second lot. Valora stared at him. There's nothing on it? It gave customers confidence. You rented an empty lot to look successful. Looking successful is the business, Mom. Valora walked to the office window. Outside, the light poles lit 6 cars and a stretch of clean, empty concrete. She thought of the 8 approval forms with her signature on them, each one a few $1,000s below the limit Richard had trusted her with. If there is an audit, she said slowly, my name is on 8 transfers. There won't be an audit if we control the company by Monday. She turned from the window. Then Saturday can't go wrong. Neither of them said the obvious thing out loud, that the vote they were calling a family duty was actually a countdown. The audience knew what Celeste didn't. Saturday wasn't about Richard's legacy. It was about noon on Monday. Friday morning, Celeste stopped at the first store before opening. Walter was already there, walking the main aisle with a clipboard, straightening price tags no customer would have noticed were crooked. The store was quiet in the way it only was at 7, fluorescent lights humming, the smell of cut pine and floor wax, 80 people's livelihoods stacked neatly on steel shelves. "You're early," he said. "So are you. 21 years. Your dad used to say if the manager arrives after the pallets win." Celeste smiled at that. Then she made herself ask, "What are people saying, Walter?" He set down the clipboard. "Half of them heard the company is being sold. The other half heard you're coming to clean house. One of the cashiers asked me yesterday if she should look for something else before Christmas. What did you tell her? That payroll cleared. The winter heaters arrived Tuesday, and I've worked for this family long enough to know the difference between a storm and a flood." "Which one is this?" Walter looked at her for a moment. "That depends on what's in Leonard's briefcase." He knew. Of course he knew. Richard had trusted Walter with the store keys for 2 decades, including one January when Richard dropped his own brass key in the parking lot and a snowplow bent it nearly in half. Walter had returned it the next morning, hammered flat, still working. Richard laughed about it for years and never got a new one cut. "The employees aren't part of the fight," Celeste said. "Whatever happens Saturday, the doors open Monday. That's all most of them want to hear." Walter picked his clipboard back up. "It's all your dad ever promised anybody, and he kept it for 32 years. Saturday afternoon, the family gathered around Richard's dining table. It was the same table where Celeste had done homework, where Julian had once asked for his first business loan, and where Richard signed the lease for the second store with barbecue sauce on his sleeve. Valora took the chair at the head. Julian sat to her right. Talia sat beside him, turning a silver bracelet around her wrist. Celeste brought Maya. Leonard sat across from them. 2 cousins stood near the doorway as witnesses. The cream agreement waited in front of Celeste, the silver pen laid across it like a place setting. Valora began without greeting anyone. "This company cannot spend months trapped between attorneys. It needs a member of Richard's family who understands his name and can carry it forward." She looked directly at Celeste. "Some people build careers away from home. Some people decide marriage is too difficult and walk away from that too. Those are personal choices. But a family company should not be controlled by someone whose answer to hardship is leaving." Talia looked down. Celeste folded her hands. "Are we discussing the company or my divorce?" "We are discussing judgment." "Then discuss the agreement you brought to my house." Julian sighed. "We have gone over this. You avoided 4 questions. Why does it release old payments? Why does your dealership accountant need company records? Why does it let you fire Dana? And why does it claim Dad was confused?" One of the cousins shifted near the door. Julian pointed at Celeste. "This is what she does. She turns every family conversation into an attack." Maya spoke for the first time. "Those are ordinary questions about an extraordinary document." Valora raised one hand. "The vote comes first. A family vote cannot transfer company shares," Celeste said. "Then it will show the court what Richard's family wanted." "Which members of his family?" Valora's mouth tightened. "His wife and children." Leonard looked at her. "I'm his brother. You have already chosen a side. I chose to follow his instructions." Julian pushed back from the table. "Can we get on with this? I have employees waiting to know who their boss is." "Name one," Celeste said. "What?" "One employee who asked you." "I don't have to give you names." "Because there isn't one." Valora picked up the resolution and read it aloud. It asked the family to remove Celeste as trustee, recognize Julian as Richard's rightful successor, and authorize him to protect company operations until the estate was settled. Leonard took the sealed Navy file from his briefcase, set it on the table, and broke the seal. Inside were 2 envelopes, a trust certificate, a doctor's statement, and a letter in Richard's handwriting. Maya opened the certificate first. 6 weeks before his death, Richard Morgan transferred 62% of the company's voting shares into the Morgan Continuity Trust. Julian leaned forward. "He couldn't do that." "They were his shares," Maya said. "He could, and he did." "Who controls the trust?" "Celeste is successor trustee. Leonard serves as co-trustee for 2 years." Valora turned toward Leonard. "You helped her steal this company?" Celeste wasn't present. "Then who was?" "Richard's estate attorney, his accountant, his doctor, and me." Julian grabbed the doctor's statement. "Dad was sick. He was taking medication. He didn't know what he signed." Maya took the page back. His doctor confirmed his capacity twice. The meetings were recorded with his permission. Valora looked at Celeste. You knew. No. You expect me to believe that? You expected me to sign 5 pages without reading them. We expect different things from each other. Maya continued. Valora receives the home and the support Richard assigned. Talia's education fund remains protected. Julian and Talia remain beneficiaries. Neither receives company control. Talia stopped turning her bracelet. My education fund is protected? Yes, Maya said. It cannot be taken because of a family vote. Talia looked at her mother. Valora avoided her eyes. Julian slapped the table. This is ridiculous. Dad promised me that company. Leonard unfolded Richard's letter. He wrote about that promise. The room went still. Leonard read only one paragraph. I told my son that if he learned the business, respected its people, and proved he could protect it, he might lead it one day. Julian heard the final 5 words and ignored every condition before them. Julian's face reddened. He would never write that. You can inspect the original with your own attorney, Maya said. Leonard touched the second envelope but did not open it. Richard also ordered an independent review of payments made during his illness. The accountant will present the findings Tuesday. Valora stood. There will be no audit of private family decisions. Dana's call log slid from Maya's folder onto the table. The decisions stopped being private when they involved company money, Maya said. Julian looked at the page and went quiet. The vote ended without anyone lowering the cream agreement toward Celeste again. That night, North Ridge Financial sent Julian formal notice. If the overdue dealership balance was not paid by noon Monday, it would begin recovering the vehicles tied to its credit line. Julian called Valora from his car. You said the trust couldn't block us. Leonard betrayed your father. I need the money by Monday. Then call Celeste. And say what? Please give me $400,000 after I tried to remove you. Valora lowered her voice. There is another way. If we challenge Richard's capacity, the trust can be frozen. How long will that take? Your attorney said we need family statements showing he was confused. I can't wait 6 months. Then stop shouting and let me handle Talia. On Sunday morning, Valora placed a 2-page statement beside Talia's coffee mug. It said Richard had forgotten names, repeated questions, and failed to understand business discussions during his final months. Talia read the first paragraph. Dad didn't forget my name. It doesn't say every day. It says I personally witnessed it. You witnessed him being weak. Weak isn't confused. Valora sat across from her. Julian could lose everything because Celeste planned this behind our backs. Maya said Celeste wasn't there. Lawyers say what protects lawyers. What happens if I don't sign? Valora's expression softened, which frightened Talia more than anger would have. I don't know what Celeste will do with your fund. You said she could take it. I said nothing is guaranteed. Maya said it is protected. Maya works for Celeste. Does she? Valora pushed the pen closer. Your tuition payment is due next month. I would hate for paperwork to hold it up while you decide which family you belong to. Talia stared at her mother. Is that a threat? It is a reminder that choices have consequences. Talia left the statement and signed. She went upstairs, closed her bedroom door, and sat on the edge of the bed with her phone. She scrolled back to the week Richard died. There were dozens of messages, hospital updates, meal offers, relatives asking what they could do. A photo from a cousin of Richard's church group holding a prayer card. A voicemail from her program advisor she had never returned. One message from Celeste stopped her. I'm downstairs. Your mother says Dad asked for no visitors. Please tell him I came. The time was 7:42 p.m. Talia remembered that evening clearly. She had been in the corner of the hospital room with her anatomy flashcards, pretending to study so she wouldn't have to watch the monitors. At 7:50, Richard had opened his eyes and asked, Did Celeste finish court yet? Valora had smoothed his blanket and said, She is too busy to come tonight. You should rest. Talia had believed her. She read Celeste's message again, then walked downstairs with her phone in one hand and the unsigned statement in the other. Valora was arranging flowers in the living room. Celeste was at the hospital that night. The scissors stopped between 2 stems. What are you talking about? Talia held up the message. She was downstairs. You told her Dad didn't want visitors. Then you told Dad she was too busy to come. Valora returned the scissors to the vase. He was exhausted. I was protecting him. From his daughter? From another argument. Every time Celeste entered that room, she asked about documents and doctors. He asked for her. You were not the one caring for him day and night. That doesn't answer me. Valora turned. Do not stand in my house and judge decisions you were too young to understand. I'm 24. And who pays for the roof over your head? There it was again. Money offered as care, then collected as obedience. Talia set the statement on the side table. I'm not signing this. Valora's face went hard. Then do not expect me to protect you from Celeste. Talia went outside and called her sister from the driveway. Celeste answered on the third ring. Are you all right? Did you come to the hospital the night Dad asked for you? Silence held for a second. I came every night they allowed me upstairs. Mom told him you were working. I was downstairs. She said he wanted no visitors. Talia looked at the upstairs curtain. Valora stood behind it. Mom wants me to sign a statement saying Dad was confused. Was he? Not when I saw him. Then don't sign something you didn't witness. She says my education fund could be held up. It can't. The trust protects it. She received the same summary I did. Talia swallowed. So she knows. Yes. What am I supposed to do now? Tell the truth about what you personally saw. Nothing more. Talia had expected Celeste to ask her to switch sides, expose Valora, or apologize for the vote. Celeste asked for none of it. The audit meeting is Tuesday, Talia said. Can I come? You are a beneficiary. You should. On Monday afternoon, Northridge sent 2 representatives to Julian's dealership. They photographed the vehicles, checked identification numbers, and placed red inventory notices inside 4 windshields. Julian arrived while a customer was examining the black Range Rover. What are you doing? He demanded. Mr. Pike closed his tablet. Protecting our collateral. Your deadline passed at noon. The transfer is delayed. From Morgan Home and Building Supply? Julian stopped. Your finance director called to confirm the company had not authorized payment, Pike said. You listed expected family funds on your last statement. We verified them. The customer stepped away from the Range Rover. Marcus watched from the reception desk as Julian lowered his voice. Give me until Friday. We gave you 3 Fridays. Pike handed him a notice. Julian read the first page, crushed it in one fist, then noticed Marcus watching. Call the attorneys, he snapped. Marcus did not move. With what retainer? Tuesday's audit meeting took place in the conference room above the First Morgan store. Below them, carts rattled across the concrete floor, and a forklift beeped as employees unloaded winter heaters. Celeste arrived with Maya. Leonard sat beside the independent accountant. Dana brought her yellow notebook and a locked records box. Talia took a chair near the door. Valora and Julian arrived together, but did not sit beside each other. Before Leonard opened the second envelope, Valora placed Talia's and signed statement on the table. Richard had stopped trusting Celeste near the end, she said. She barely visited during his final week. No, Talia said. Every head turned toward her. Valora's eyes narrowed. This is not the time. Dad asked for Celeste. She came to the hospital, and you kept them apart. You misunderstood. Talia placed her phone on the table with Celeste's message open. I heard him ask for her 8 minutes after this was sent. Valora reached for the phone. Talia pulled it back. And you told me Celeste could take my education fund if I didn't support Julian. You knew it was protected. I was trying to keep this family together. You were trying to keep me afraid. Talia slid the capacity statement toward Maya. I will not sign this. I withdraw my support from Saturday's resolution. Valora stared at her. After everything I have done for you? Talia's voice shook, but she held her mother's gaze. That question is how you make help feel like a bill. Leonard opened the second envelope. Richard's audit instructions lay on top. Beneath them were the 9 payment records, his accountant's notes, and a signed letter describing the day he discovered money had continued leaving the company after he withdrew permission. The independent accountant began with the first transfer. $42,000 was approved by Richard Morgan 14 months ago. The stated purpose was a short-term advance for 2 delivery vans. Julian nodded quickly. Exactly. Dad knew. The accountant turned the page. Did Morgan Supply receive the vans? The arrangement changed. Where is the amended agreement? Dad and I handled business verbally. Then where is the repayment? Julian looked at Valora. We agreed to roll it forward. The accountant placed 8 more transfers on the table. These payments were made over the following 11 months. Each was below $50,000. Together, they total $386,000. Valora folded her arms. I had signing authority. For emergency company expenses below $50,000, the accountant said. Why were payments to the same dealership divided into 8 amounts? They were separate needs. Consulting, fleet support, vendor deposit, temporary stock. Which one is correct? Julian told me how to label them. Julian turned toward her. You chose the descriptions. Because you kept calling from the dealership, saying the lender would close you down. You said Dad approved it. You said he would. Leonard placed one hand on the table. Richard approved one payment. Who approved the next 8? Neither answered. Dana opened the locked box and removed copies of the company ledgers. The transfers came from the operating reserve. That reserve pays supplier deposits and covers payroll when construction sales slow in winter. Julian shrugged. The company makes millions. It can absorb $386,000. Dana opened another folder. We replaced the roof at the South Elm store last month. 2 major contractors paid late. If I had sent the $400,000 you requested on Tuesday, Friday's payroll and 3 supplier drafts would have been at risk. Downstairs, the forklift beeped again. Celeste looked at Julian. 80 people were supposed to carry your dealership until you looked successful again? Don't make this emotional. Payroll is not emotional. It is due every Friday. He leaned back. This is about you wanting Dad's chair. It always has been. I haven't sat in it. You moved his photographs before the funeral was over. The accountant continued. Julian's dealership had used the funds during the same months North Ridge issued late notices. No vehicles went to Morgan Supply. No services were documented. No repayments were made. Then Dana played the recorded call. Julian's voice filled the room. I need a same-day transfer prepared for $400,000. When the recording reached his warning about Dana's job, Julian pushed away from the table. You recorded me without permission? The finance line records every call, Dana said. You received the notice when you called. This woman has been working against me. Walter, who had entered quietly with an inventory report, spoke from the doorway. She has been working for the company. Julian pointed toward Celeste. You planned all of this. Celeste shook her head once. You called Dana. You named the amount. You threatened her. I wasn't on the line. He turned on Valora. Tell them Dad knew about the money. Valora's lips parted, but no words came. Mom. He knew about the first payment. You said he approved the others. You said you would replace them before he noticed. So now this is my fault? You signed every transfer. Because you came to my house crying that you would lose your business. I never cried. You sat in your father's kitchen and begged me. Talia looked between them. The 2 people who demanded family unity on Saturday were now reaching for the same truth and trying to place it in the other's hands. Maya waited until they stopped. The trust allows the company to recover unauthorized funds. Any verified debt can be deducted from Julian's financial interest. The company may also pursue civil recovery if necessary. Julian looked at Celeste. You're going to sue your own brother? The independent board will decide how the company recovers its money. You control the board. Leonard and I control the trust together. Neither of us can erase your debt alone. That protection applies to me too. Valora gripped the arms of her chair. What happens to my house? Maya answered. Richard protected the home and your monthly support. Those terms remain. Your authority over company accounts ends today. Valora looked at Celeste. You could change that. I won't undo what Dad chose. Valora's grip on her purse loosened just slightly. She had prepared for revenge, because revenge was the easiest motive for her to understand. Celeste continued. But you will not speak for the company. You will not ask employees to move money. You will not use Talia's tuition or anyone else's support to control a family decision. Until the review is finished, contact about the trust goes through Maya. So I need permission to speak to my own family? You need permission to speak for the company. Those are different things. Valora picked up her purse. She did not apologize. Julian did not beg. They left the rooms separately and took different cars from the parking lot. Talia remained in her chair. Do I lose my education fund because I voted against you? She asked. No. Even after what I said about your divorce? Dad protected your education. Your vote doesn't change that. Talia rubbed the place on her wrist where her bracelet had rested. I should have told you he asked for you. Yes. She waited for Celeste to make the answer softer. Celeste did not. Can we fix this? We can begin by telling each other the truth before someone asks us to raise a hand. It was not forgiveness wrapped in one clean sentence. Talia had made choices. Celeste had been hurt by them. But when Talia left, she took Richard's capacity statement with her and tore it in half before placing it in the recycling bin. The consequences arrived without a family audience. North Ridge recovered 4 vehicles from Julian's dealership. He sold the black Range Rover and used the money to negotiate a smaller payment plan. Marcus resigned after learning Julian had listed vehicles as available that the lender already controlled. The rented second lot went back to its owner, and the billboard contracts lapsed one by one, until the only place Julian's face still smiled was a fading poster in his own showroom window. For the first time since opening the dealership, Julian had to decide whether he wanted to run a real business or only be seen beside one. Some mornings he unlocked the doors himself now. Nobody could say yet which man would win. Valora remained in the family home. Relatives still called, but the story she had spread no longer held together. Marcia had seen the trust certificate. Talia told 2 cousins why she withdrew her vote. Leonard refused to argue with anyone and simply offered Maya's written summary. Valora stopped calling Celeste a thief. She did not replace the word with an apology. Celeste did not become chief executive of Morgan Home and Building Supply. She became trustee and board chair beside Leonard, then kept the experienced operating president Richard had hired 3 years earlier. She continued working at her law firm while the audit moved forward. Every future family transaction required a written agreement and an independent review. Dana received authority to stop any transfer that lacked both. Walter remained manager of the first store. The employees who had spent 2 weeks hearing rumors learned that payroll had cleared and their jobs were not part of the family fight. The cashier who had asked about looking for other work before Christmas was still at Register 3, and nobody ever told her how close the operating reserve had come to running dry. 6 weeks after the Navy file was opened, Celeste arrived before the first store opened. Walter waited near the front counter with Richard's brass key resting in his palm. "Leonard said this should go to you," he said. Celeste looked at the worn metal. The shallow bend still in it from the winter the snowplow caught it, hammered flat and never replaced. "How long did Dad let you open this store?" 21 years. She closed Walter's fingers around the key. "Then keep it. You know this place." He studied her. "Aren't you in charge now?" "My job is to make sure the doors keep opening." Dana came down from the office and confirmed that payroll had cleared. A floor supervisor called from the loading area to say the winter heaters had arrived. Celeste took off her coat and helped Walter move a display that blocked the front aisle. At 8 o'clock, the first employees entered through the side door. Walter placed Richard's key in the lock. Outside, ordinary Saturday customers began parking beside the garden center. A contractor waited with a supply list folded in his jacket pocket. A woman stood near the entrance comparing paint colors on her phone. Walter turned the key. The doors opened on time.